Mystery, murder, deception, and romance. All of these things and more are at the center of Kasumi Yasuda's criminally underrated thriller, Denpa Seinen, a story about an unlikely duo trying to run away from the past while also running away from the police. Since only one of the 5 volumes is in English at this point in time, today's video will unfortunately only be covering the first 10 chapters of the manga. And it kills me to say this because I've become a full-on addict to this plot. I love myself a good thriller. Definitely way more invested in this thing than I should be with what little we have here. But it's not without its reason. Denpa Seinen's story is dark, twisted, and intriguing right from the start. Yasuda isn't really wasting any time with pacing in this manga, allowing the mystery to unfold in an effortless fashion. It's gripping and raw and oh so disturbing. Don't let this minimalistic art style fool you, because the subject material at hand here is about as adult as it gets. This is Denpa Seinen. There isn't much that can be found on the author known as Kasumi Yasuda online. We do know that they were born on the 20th of January, 1995 in the Hyogo prefecture of Japan. We also know that Yasuda currently has an 8-volume series called Fool Night that is currently being published in Big Comic Superior, with 3 volumes having official English translations. Its debut was in the 825th edition of Superior in November of 2020, and has received international acclaim since then. Aside from their Twitter, which is mostly Fool Night related posts and drawings, there just isn't much information out there about this author, aside from these 3 sentences on the Barnes & Noble website. Now, what really confused me about this About the Author tab was that it states that Kasumi Yasuda was selected for the 76th Shogakukan New Comic Award in the Seinen category. But I checked the most recent Shogakukan Award and they're only up to the 69th. They haven't even gotten to the 76th yet. Also, searching for the name Kasumi or Yasuda yields nothing on the awards page itself. Maybe the confusion comes from the name Shogakukan, which is the publisher that owns the semi-monthly Big Comic Superior, but then it doesn't make sense why they would bring up an award that doesn't exist yet. Who knows? But it gets even more confusing from there. If you look right here and here, it says he and him. But I've played enough Mass Effect to know that Kasumi is a girl's name. Why does it say he? I tried to confirm this on their Twitter, but we got ourselves another anonymous author on our hands. But I'm not crazy, right? Kasumi is a girl's name. I swear to God it's a girl's name. Please, tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, because if not, Barnes & Noble needs to update their shit, like, immediately. So like I said at the beginning of the video, only 10 chapters of Denpa Seinen have been translated into English by third parties online. Unfortunately, one of the realities of having a medium this big is that there are bound to be thousands and thousands of series out there that never get discovered outside of Japan. What really irks me about this particular series though, is that it's really fucking good. So we're at the whim of the translation teams here. It's only been a month since these chapters dropped, so let's hope that they're being translated in chunks rather than chapter by chapter. Because if it's not, I'm telling you people, the manga community is missing out on what could be an instant classic for the psychological thriller genre. But let me just hop off my soapbox for a second. You want to know what this thing is actually about? Well, the premise is pretty simple. Fujio Sera, an amateur radio show host, is on the run from the police after a vicious murder. Whom the victim is a bit of a mystery for the time being, but I'll touch on this later. While on the run, Fujio meets Yoko Itami, an escort and a coincidental superfan of his radio show. She's even able to identify him after just a few sentences of dialogue. Okay, meets may have been a bit of an understatement, it's more like he calls her up. She's a call girl after all. He does this after almost attempting to kill a konbini worker earlier that night, or at least it's implied that's what he's gonna do. Calling Yoko was a means of making the split personality part of him go away for the time being. So after a full night of sharing stories, not having sex, and a quick police evasion, Yoko can already tell that something is up with this guy. She knows he's avoiding the police, but doesn't quite know the severity of the crime just yet. Despite these red flags, though, she makes him go on a little breakfast date with her. There, they discuss how Fujio used someone else's insurance card to identify himself to the police. And with that, Yoko deduces that he's on the run for some kind of a crime. However, this doesn't stop her from begging Fujio to take her away with him in regular simp fashion. Yes, it's kind of corny, hold off on those angry comments, but I don't really mind it in Denpa Seinen. I mean, this is the type of shit a superfan would do for anyone, I feel like, not just a radio show host. So the setup isn't completely out of the realm of possibility here. But yeah, she wants to run away with him essentially, but hasn't had enough sleep lately, so she just passes out right there in the restaurant. I have no idea how long she's been up for, but she just hits the table, allowing our boy Fujio here to just walk on out of there like a stone cold G. Just kidding. He goes back to bring her home after he sees a couple holding hands in public. So already, the bubblings of a strange romance have begun to form within our two unorthodox protagonists. And that's just the setup. If you don't want to be spoiled, leave now or forever hold your peace, because I'm going through the whole thing. Good? Okay. Starting in chapters 3 and 4, the story begins branching off a little while the pair makes their way around town the following day. This is with the detectives working on a potential serial killing case and Saya Sugimura, a depressed bike sales lady currently in a long-distance relationship with someone who doesn't really love her. She's also a fan of Fujio's radio show, which will come into play later. So seeing as most places require ID and personal internet usage can be tracked by the authorities, Fujio takes Yoko to spend the night at an internet cafe, the greatest place on earth. It's important to note that he does so using the membership card of Kihara Toshihiro, the same name that was on the insurance card I mentioned earlier. Anyway, it's here at the cafe that Fujio uses the internet to collect news on police activity. It's also where the first slip-up in the case against them begins. You see, earlier, the two had recorded an episode of Fujio's show that won't ever get released. I guess they just did it for fun. In this recording, they talk about going to Osaka. Due to the crime rate there, reporting on crimes is lower, making it easier for them to lay low from the police for the time being. But because Fujio falls asleep early later that night, Yoko manages to break into his account where he posts the radio show, and she uploads the unusable recording I mentioned from earlier. Like I said, she doesn't know at this point that he killed someone. She's too focused on the fact that Fujio's fans need an update. So now, there's a potential trail for the police to follow him with, you big dummy. Honestly, what he should have done is deleted it since it was on his phone to begin with, but I guess the guy just can't stop himself from recording things. He says that the recording is a source of determination or something like that, but it's stupid. They should have never recorded something together, but he did. Now there's evidence. And now, everyone who follows the radio show knows that the two of them are heading to Osaka, and Fujio, for the time being, is completely unaware. The following day, the two go out bicycle shoppings as a mean of acquiring transportation for themselves, because, according to Fujio, all public transportation spots are going to have surveillance cameras there, and he doesn't want to leave behind any evidence of himself going to a certain location. This is why they'll be biking to Osaka rather than taking the train. But this is a feat that normally takes a car 7 hours, as it's roughly 500 kilometers away, which is 310 miles. So I mean, they're going to be biking for a long-ass time. Once they get to the bicycle store though, they bump into Saya, the sad girl I told you about who sells bikes and is also a super fan of Fujio. Even as they're purchasing these bikes, Saya slowly starts recognizing their voices. In fact, she's certain she knows just who they are. They're Fujio and Yoko, of Fujio's radio of course, on their way to Osaka according to the most recent update. Newest one in about 6 months now. And then, he just snaps. When Fujio realizes what Yoko has done, he takes her out of the store and just smacks the shit out of her and leaves her there on the side of the street. It's crazy. And as he's walking off, he begins having this mental breakdown over the whole situation at hand, wondering how he's going to delete the hosting website or even the logs of his show somehow. And then, Saya catches up to him. Apparently, she followed the two of them out there, and in a strange twist of events, the sales lady starts crying and begging Fujio. Apparently, both Saya and her boyfriend are both huge fans of his radio show, which is the only thing holding their relationship together, as sad and pathetic as that sounds. Ever since moving to France, her programmer boyfriend has been blowing her off constantly, going days between calls. Pretty obvious what's going on here, but she still clings on to the facade of their partnership despite it being so painful. Saya is essentially asking Fujio to give her boyfriend a call in hopes of rekindling their relationship somehow. To him and us as the reader, it's pretty clear that this won't fix anything, but still, she pleads with him nonetheless. I really don't know what she was expecting to happen, but I love that this is included in the manga because it just packs such an emotional punch when this happens, when you see her essentially begging to save a doomed relationship, something I'm sure we could all relate to. It's pretty good. I like it when stories are sad because, it makes you feel something. Anyway, the only thing Fujio cares about in this situation, out of all the stuff she just said, was the small detail about the boyfriend being a computer programmer. And so he agrees to her plea in hopes of manipulating her boyfriend to somehow erase these website logs, going with Saya to her apartment and leaving Yoko behind to cry. Tell me this shit isn't getting good. So once they get to the apartment, they call up the boyfriend over in France, and as you'd expect, it's pretty sad. Listening to the whole conversation taking place, it's pretty obvious that the boyfriend only wants to talk to Fujio. Despite this, Saya is just overjoyed by him even talking to her to begin with. But unfortunately for Fujio, he's unable to ask about deleting the website. Like there's no way of bringing this up naturally in a group conversation. He does, however, manage to get him to give him a call back, hoping to do so without Saya there to hear his request. And as the call ends, the two go to bed for the night, with Fujio wholeheartedly knowing that this is purely for personal gain. Some real Lelouch chess master shit right there. The next day, we see Yoko at the same internet cafe again, watching the news as they talk about some sort of serial killer on the loose. Everything from time frames to the height description of the suspect seem to match Fujio's description, which would explain why he's always acting so unhinged throughout the story. I mean, he's hallucinating another him after all. But of course, Yoko doesn't want to believe this. We then cut back to the apartment where we see Fujio managing to steal Saya's phone before she heads out to work for that morning. Unfortunately though, this doesn't end up helping him. After all the social engineering it took to get to this point, Fujio comes to another dead end, as the boyfriend ends up being smarter than Saya. Essentially, he pieces together from Fujio's strange request that he's in some kind of trouble with someone and wants to delete the website logs for criminal reasons. But that's not even why he doesn't help him. The guy in France doesn't help Fujio simply because he's too big of a fan and wants him to continue posting shows. Like, what are the chances of this guy running into so many fans of him? It's ridiculous. Some may even say cosmically funny. He's all like, "Come on, bro, look at all the comments you're getting. You can't give up now." And then he just hangs up, not really giving Fujio a definite yes or no. Funny enough, when Fujio does go to check the comments, he sees that Yoko left one telling him where to find her. But he just blows this off for the time being. So all in all, the call was a bust. And just like with the recording post, now there's something else working against him. Because now, the boyfriend starts doing research on old boy here while at work. It seems that the walls around Fujio are slowly beginning to close in around him. Now there's just even more evidence and even more trails to find him. 2 days later, and Fujio is in full-blown panic mode, spending way too much time in a dry bathtub and talking to himself. Meanwhile, as all this is happening, we cut over to Saya, as she's at a diner talking to her parents who came to visit her. It's a very awkward and uncomfortable meeting. Not much is said other than some small talk, lectures about how she shouldn't be living on her own, and wanting her to settle down finally. The whole thing encapsulates the awkward and oftentimes destructive relationship we have with our parents, pretty accurately too. After a while though, Saya just tells them to leave, and she begins crying after a coworker sees her parents heading out. Saya then just takes out to the pouring streets, crying, alone, desperate for her boyfriend to pick up the phone so that she could just have someone to confide in. But then when he does answer, he really wants nothing to do with her and only wants to talk to Fujio again. God damn, this girl can't catch a break, can she? Ultimately though, they break up, and Saya deletes his contact. This is all told to Fujio as she gets back to the apartment. It seems that she finally has accepted that the two of them are not going to be together. And so, Fujio comforts her. I mean, this guy's just going from one girl to the next. I mean, a social engineer from one to the next. After a few moments, surprise, surprise, it's the boyfriend calling Saya's phone, though the call is meant for Fujio this time. Now, after some research, the boyfriend has reason to believe that Fujio here might be the one responsible for the string of murders happening lately, the serial killer they talked about on the radio, and the same one the detectives are investigating. Essentially, what he's doing to Fujio here is blackmailing him into continuing the show, since the guy just likes it so much. He states that he'll delete the logs, but only if he continues the show, however that makes sense, adding the condition that Fujio needs a second host, the same way it used to be when he first had the radio show. So all in all, this was for nothing. All of it was for nothing. In fact, he's worse off now because of the blackmail and the fact that he's got another party involved. So even more witnesses now. But now because of all this, Fujio now needs Yoko once again and storms off to go get her. Yoko, by the way, who has been waiting for him every day at the same place he left her at. So before Yoko agrees to go back to him though, she does confront him about the 4 murders being reported by the police on the TV. And this is where we finally learn the truth, or at least part of the truth. Fujio finally admits to having killed someone, the reason why he's on the run in the first place. Now, although the police have claimed there to be a serial killer on the loose, Fujio only claims to be responsible for the second murder. And since the police believe it's the work of only one man, Fujio has now been roped into the other 3 deaths. So yes, he's on the run for murder, but not for all of them. He's not a serial killer. He can't exactly go, yeah, I killed someone, but not everyone, just to clarify. Like, he can't do that. He can't go to the police. So he's essentially just gone on the run. All of this comes to Yoko as a pleasant surprise, as she thought he may have killed all 4 people. Still though, the girl's crazy. He just said he killed someone, and she's fine with it. Like, she's just fine with it. I can't complain though, I love this shit. This is written so good, I love this shit. But yeah, they head back to Saya's apartment and inform her that they'll be leaving in the morning. They end up buying the bicycles, and then later that night, all 3 of them eat and have a good time. A short moment of peace before heading out the next day. And since Osaka is no longer a viable option for the 2, they have to head to Fukushima. The reason why they're going to Fukushima is because Yoko has a contact there that can get them housing. And that's all, folks. 10 chapters. That's it. Done. That's where it fucking cuts off. That's where it cuts off right there. They're like, no more. They didn't translate any more shit. It just cuts it off at the fucking cliffhanger right there. And now, hopefully, you guys see why this series needs to be translated to completion. Sugarxy, however you pronounce this name right here, buddy, please, do us all a favor and finish what you started. I'm begging you here. I'm down on my hands and knees begging you here. Please, just finish translating it. Since Fool's Night is currently getting official English volumes, I don't see Denpa Seinen here getting translated anytime soon. Like I said earlier, that thing's gone international now, so they're probably not going to be focusing on this particular series. They're going to focus on Fool Night. The only way it would get translated is if some independent party online did it for free, which probably won't happen. Honestly though, I'm so invested in the story that I'd be willing to track down translators, purchase the Japanese scans, and then pay to have them translated. It's that good. My synopsis left out so much nuance and detail that can't really be translated unless you just read it for yourself. It's definitely a story you have to read to get all the little details. But what did I even like about this manga? Sounds like I'm just complaining here. Well, for starters, the art is exceptionally original. I love this style. It's simple, yet stylized, cartoonish, yet characterizing. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. I've never been a fan of that bubbly sort of direction character designs seem to be going towards, so seeing this really piqued my interest. And that ties directly into the next thing I liked about Denpa Seinen, the characters. It's the same with Fool Night. Both the character designs and personality traits of the characters, like just the presentation of them, has been something I can applaud Yasuda for. The outfits in particular, I don't know why, but I like when mangakas have a sense of fashion in their stories. I mean, it's not Bleach levels of drip or anything, but it's still pretty fashionable. Same goes for the backstories and personalities. Too often in manga, we see these cookie-cutter archetypes that don't leave much of an impression on you. Each character in this feels unique on their own. Especially Saya, man. I kept feeling so bad for Saya throughout the whole story. Girl couldn't catch a break the whole time. Flashbacks are also handled well. They don't take up too much chapter time and fade into and out of the scene rather fluidly. And how could I forget the mystery of it all? How do we even know if Fujio is telling the truth or not? He could very well be the serial killer that the police are searching for. Could they really be that negligent with their investigation? Who knows? I mean, I certainly won't, because there's no more chapters. But yeah, that's it. That's everything I had to talk about this manga. It's so damn good. Hopefully you guys go and read it before I just spoiled everything for you. And as always, in the description, I left the socials in case you want to follow Kasumi Yasuda. But there's not much left to say about the series. Like I said earlier, it's raw, it's real, it's Denpa Seinen.